welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. This is Jessica. I am going to be hosting today, and I am here with the author of Death of a Dancing Queen, a Billie Levine mystery. Please introduce yourself and tell us about this book.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Giarratano, and I'm the author of Death of a Dancing Queen. It is my first, it's the first book in what I'd hope to be a very long-standing series of featuring a private investigator, Billie Levine. She is a 24-year-old girl from North Jersey, and she's revamped her grandfather's private investigation business. She sets up office in a Jewish deli in Teaneck in hopes that the flexible hours will allow her to trade off working with her brother. They are caring for their mother with early onset Alzheimer's disease. And her first case is a college student from a nearby college who's clearly drug addicted. And his girlfriend's missing, and he seeks her help in finding her. And Billy thinks that the girlfriend has just ghosted him. This guy clearly has problems, and this girl got sick of it and split. But of course, they wouldn't have a book if that happened. So that's not what happens. And Billy quickly gets embroiled in two murder mysteries, a decades-long feud between a neo-Nazi skinhead group and a Jewish mob. And her ex-boyfriend's involved, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I had fun writing it. You'll have fun reading it.
Oh my gosh, it is a lot of fun. And there's just so much. And I love that there's just layers to everything. Like you mentioned, you have this rich history of a feud between the Jewish mob and the skinhead group. And then you have just a family story, like Billy being a second generation PI. And I just loved all of it. And then her taking care of her mother, which is also kind of heartbreaking in and of its own way. So if you want to just talk a little bit about just like the different parts to the story and sort of how they came together. Did you start with Billy? Did you start with the feud? How did it all sort of come together?
I love PI fiction. So the idea of writing a PI character, just, I've done it in different ways. Like I've written some rough drafts of like a journalist, kind of PI sort of thing. But how Billy came about was I also love the history of Jewish gangsters and mobsters. And it's very deep rooted in a history of the Lower East Side. And that's where my family comes from. And I just wanted to explore that, but kind of through a modern lens. And it is, you do have to suspend your disbelief of it, because as far as I know, there are no more Jewish mobs. I mean, that's not to say there aren't Jewish criminals, but like that old school kind of mob, like gangsterdom, that we think of with Tony Soprano.
Kosher Nostra, I remember people referring to it as. Is that actually something or was that just my father?
Oh my God, I've never heard of that expression.
You've never heard that before? Oh,
Kosher Nostra?
My father always used to refer to it as the Kosher Nostra. He used to say,
That's genius.
Like so-and-so was involved with the Kosher Nostra. And I was like, oh, okay.
No, now I'm going to Google that after this is over. You should,
because I hope that wasn't a fever dream.
No, but that's genius.
Well, yeah. If I continue,
I'm gonna work that into a book. And I just wanted to have fun with that. I just wanted to play with that. You know what I mean? It's not like, it's funny because so much of the reality of the book stems from really Billy and her circumstances and less so about the crimes, which are fun, because it's fun to make bad things happen. Like it is, like in that, make that stuff like, she's facing off against neo-Nazis, like, and I had a lot of fun with that. That's the fun part. The serious part's the stuff with her mom. That's a little bit heavier.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's so funny that you say that. It's fun to make bad things happen. I think there's and you deal with true crime podcasts in this as well, because there really are two murders that are investigated, sort of. They're just decades apart within the story. But the murder of the college student, she was doing a true crime podcast with her friend, which is a big thing. I mean, you know, it's huge. And I am certainly not a person who has not partaken in that myself, not for my own podcast, just consuming true crime and true crime podcasts. But, I think like one of the things that appeals to people about that type of thing is that you can look at bad things happening from a bird's eye view and dissect it, and you feel like you have some sort of control over it, even though you don't. So I wonder if that kind of plays into having bad things happen to characters in a book.
I think as women too, women really are the largest audience, I think, for true crime podcasts. And there is something about constantly hearing about our own vulnerability and then feeling like, okay, maybe I know the signs to look out for. I mean, we're the most vigilant, right? So I think for mystery writing in particular, for me, I always say the mystery gives my character something to do while they're figuring themselves out. Like, that's how I like to think of it. And I like a puzzle to solve. So, my plots are complex. They are twisty turny. You're not going to guess it right away. At least I should hope not. But there is something about having fun with made up people who feel incredibly real, playing a little bit of God with them and getting them into these like crazy situations that they then have to get themselves out of like triumphantly. And I have a lot of fun with that as well. There is justice at the end of all of this, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that part very much. I enjoy making them miserable too. I don't know what it is. I'm like, you will suffer, but then you will be okay.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I just think there were so many really good characters in the story. And I just kind of loved Billie's voice. I love just sort of, first of all, I love having this really strong, is she Gen Z? I'm old. I'm Gen X.
Me too. So am I.
Oh, yay, Gen X, high five across the screen.
Yep.
Jewish protagonist. She's got a lot of heart. And I love that it's just, this is just who she is. And like, what is it like with Nuri, Jasmine, who's the first victim's roommate, like she makes a comment like, oh, well, you can't get a tattoo. And Billie's like, yeah, well, that's not true. You can't. I really liked that about her, how she was just so like upfront, like, this is who I am. And just kind of how she dealt with everybody, then there's also her family's connection to this mob family and this murder from decades ago. Now, there is a strip club that plays into account in this situation. How did you kind of decide to center everything there? Because the book is called Death of a Dancing Queen, so we're not talking ABBA.
Right.
And
that the whole title is a whole nother story. But when I originally started, I was looking at my notes and I was originally plotting it. I think at first I had I like the idea of like I love grittiness. You know what I mean? I don't like I like a bit of grit. I don't write things that are very dark, and like you'll never catch me writing anything too disturbing or anything like that. But I do like grit. I just feel like it gives me something to hold on to. And the strip club connection, originally the Goths, I was going to make Italian. And I was like, no, that's so cliche. Don't do that. And I was like, no.
Kosher Nostra for the win.
I was like, bring back Jewish mobsters. And so I just felt like a strip club really lend itself to some of the Jersey sleaze that I kind of inserted into the book. Like it also felt so North Jersey to me. I was like, this works. So that's sort of why, I like playing with tropes. I like playing with stereotypes. I like turning things on its head where you have an expectation. There is so much about the story that is rooted in traditional PI genre, right? In many ways, like it's influenced by Raymond Chandler and Elmore Leonard and, but even also Janet Ivanovich and like Sue Grafton and Rob Thomas, who writes Veronica Mars. So, which is one of my favorite shows of all time.
Very, very exciting. I'm always happy to see Veronica Mars come up. And I always wish more people knew. I mean, people know about her, and she had sort of like a few resurgences, but I don't think that she got the traction that she deserved. And maybe that's why we love her so much.
I love Veronica Mars. And when the show was over, I'm like, oh, why isn't there wasn't enough like Veronica Mars type books for me to read? I'm like, why isn't there more like this? It's just, so when I pitch the book, I pitch it as an East Coast Jewish Veronica Mars. I feel like, and then people are like, oh, I'm sold, because we do love her and we want more of it. So it's really influenced by all of these, pop culture references as well, Veronica, like I said before. And but I have fun with it. It won't feel stale to anyone. They'll recognize the genre, but then they'll also, I think, be pleasantly surprised by what I do with it as well. At least I hope so.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. Like a few other things I just kind of wanted to mention. I loved oh man, I loved Aaron. He was a very complex and interesting character. Where did he sort of come into the storytelling?
So for me, I'm a big fan of the romance, second chance romance trope. I love that. And I love complicated first loves where, there is a bit of conflict within their personalities, but they just, are drawn together. So that was something that I really wanted to have fun with. And I like the idea of Aaron being the son of a mobster, who has his own criminal past, and we're very moral gray areas that I think are fun to deal with. I am very fond of, also, he's not a villain, but sympathetic villains I also like, where characters, anti-heroes and things like that I really enjoy. So he kind of came from that. I also wanted him to defy that good, that typical Jewish boy stereotype, the kind you bring home to mom. I wanted to defy
Aaron
that.
is the kind you don't bring home to mom.
Correct. Correct.
And that's what makes him so appealing.
He is super appealing, and Gramps hates him, so that makes it even more fun. And I liked that his brother also is tied to the Levines, because Maddie and David have history, and that history is also very complicated. So they can't really untangle themselves from each other unless they are physically in different countries, which is what had happened, over the course of their relationship, because otherwise they're just never going to rid each other of each other.
I like that. Yeah, no, for sure. This was just like you said, this was a really fun book. And I really hope people pick it up because I think it's going to scratch a lot of itches for people. There's a lot of really cool things happening just in like mystery and how things are expanding. And I think that this is just a super, super example of all of that. I wanted to also ask you, you were a librarian at one point.
I was, yeah.
Tell us about that.
So I was a ESL teacher. I was an ESL teacher for 5 years. And then I got my master's degree in library science from Rutgers. And I was working as a young adult librarian in Rockaway Township, New Jersey. Shout out there. For a few years before I had my kid. And I really loved that job. So I did programming, acquisitions, but I also taught classes. I did story time for young kids too, but I also taught tech classes. But I loved being a librarian. I love the library. When I got the publishing contract from Datura, I was like, just get me into libraries. Whatever we have to do, just get me into libraries. Because all my previous books are indie titles, and they are not in libraries, except for my local one, and that's because they were nice to me. So
that makes me happy that that makes me super happy.
Oh, yeah. And I constantly I'm like, people are like, oh, I want to buy your book. I'm like, get it from the library. Like, it's just my natural, I always go to the library first. And my library is great. If I ask them to buy something, they buy something. I'm like, buy this book for me,
Yep.
And I read it, and everybody else gets to read it. But I love my library, and I loved being a librarian. And the only thing that really kept me from the profession was I live an hour away from where I worked, and I had a baby, and they part-time was not an option for me. And unfortunately, in my neck of the woods in Pennsylvania, they do not hire MLSs for their librarian jobs. It's the director of our library, who's wonderful. She has an MLS, but everybody else I don't think does. So it shows you a big difference between New Jersey and Pennsylvania library systems and how they're funded. Because New Jersey systems are well funded.
So our, I mean, Long Island is also,
For sure.
Yeah, Long Island. In a way, we're kind of like mirror images. It's like there's a big similarity, I think, between the areas, because I do have friends who work down there as well in the Jersey, and but yeah, no, for sure. Actually, now that I think about it, I do kind of want to just really quickly come back to the book and just about you know, uh, Billy and David's mother,
Yes.
and that, because you did mention that you had a kid. I have kids too, and Billy has decided that that's not a route she necessarily wants to go because of this genetic predisposition, and it is heartbreaking. Would you like to just chat a little bit about how that part of the story?
Sure. So I love someone who has dementia. Now, whether it's Alzheimer's, it's hard to say because it's not really been properly diagnosed at this stage of the game. But so Billy's 24. When I was 24, I will say, I'm like at the time, I was like, I'm not having kids. I'll adopt children later. I don't know. That was like a thing I was thinking of. I was not, 24, you're so young. You're just doing your thing. I'm like, I don't know if I want kids. I'm 44 now and I have 3 children. So, it makes sense that Billy would just not envision a future with children. Her mom does have early onset. She was diagnosed. She's in her 50s, so she is quite young. Anything before 60 is early onset. And, whether or not this is a freak of nature or genetic is yet to be determined. Billy would have to get tested. Her mother would have to get tested. They'd have to do genetic testing. And that's maybe something I will confront in another book at some point. I haven't figured out what I'm doing with that right now. But so, just like she really just doesn't want to put a child through this. Caring for her mom is heartbreaking because it's like caring for a child, except that child is an adult. So Billy just can't imagine doing that to, a child if she was to have one. She just can't. I mean, and that's kind of what holds her back for the most part. This idea of she's constantly, every time she looks at her mother, who she loves because it's her mom, she's looking into the future, and it terrifies her. And it really keeps her from sort of living in the present as well, because there's just constant, terrible outlook she has. I mean, she muddles through, man. She really does. So, and I think the PI work really keeps her focused on something that gives her a sense of pride. I mean, I wrote this before the pandemic, so I could have easily given Billy a desk job. She's teleworking like through Zoom, like, and Microsoft rooms or whatever the hell it is, like everyone else. I could have easily done that, and she could have supported her mom that way. But that wouldn't be fun. And I feel like it just wouldn't give her that sense of purpose. That it would have made her much sadder, in my opinion. Going after neo-Nazis is less sad than
God, so much.
Yeah, it's less sad than her being in a basement office.
Working out of a deli, nonetheless.
Yeah, like, oh, I had so much fun with that. I was like, what if she has an office in the deli?
So before we close out, I kind of want to pick up that thread. What's your favorite thing to eat when you go to a deli?
So first and foremost, I was a vegetarian for many, 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 many years. And then I was like, I don't really eat a lot of red meat, but if I'm going to a Jewish deli, I am having pastrami. Like, it's happening. That's what I'm having.
And actually, it's funny you say that, because there is a distinction, between Jewish delis and different types of delis. And I kind of had to go over this with my cousin, who has lived in the South all her life. She kept saying, oh, well, we want to go to deli. We want to go to the deli. And like on Long Island, you go to the deli and you're getting bacon, egg, and cheese.
Mhm.
Like that's what you're doing. Like it's like a place where you get sandwich, and not that you
Yes.
think the Jewish deli, but it's a very different type of cuisine and it's a very different type of culture. So, she's just like, but where's the crepe block and where's the knishes? And I was just like, okay, what you are asking for is a Jewish deli, or I guess now it's really kosher style or New York style, they're calling it,
Hmm.
because there aren't too many delis that are kosher because there's a lot of competition. So, like you'll go and you'll get like they'll have all of that stuff and they'll have like the tongue and all of that, but it's not like, you can still get a cheeseburger, and that's kind of what those delis are turning into near me, at least. But when I was growing up, that's not what it was. Yeah. So then there's like your corner deli, and then there's like Italian delis. I mean, so like she was arguing back and forth. She's like, no, I was taught that deli means this. And I said, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying there are distinctions between the delis. And if you're on Long Island and you're like, I want to go to the deli, someone's going to take you
Yep.
to the corner and be like, bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich. What?
Yep.
So yeah, you have to be distinct.
Yes. And obviously, Nagel's is an old school Jewish deli. Like
Yes.
you're gonna go there
Yeah.
and have matzo ball soup. You're gonna have your half sours. You're gonna have your like kosher coleslaw. I was thinking of Sarge's when I wrote it in Manhattan.
That was actually what I was wondering, if that's if that was kind of
I was
in your
thinking of
mind.
for the food for sure. Because even I grew up in Jersey. I grew up in a very Jewish area, and we didn't have a proper, like, all our delis were just like corner delis for the most part. Like to go, and also they would never, like, you go to the diner and you can have matzo ball soup at the stage of the game.
Oh, that's
You can
true.
go
That's
to
true.
you can in Jersey, you can go to the diner and have like a good turkey club. I mean, you wouldn't have the bacon in a kosher Jewish deli, obviously, but that was like, somebody's like, is that wish fulfillment? I was like, kind of, because now I really need it. Like I can't get anything like that here. And like it's funny because my husband's Italian, but I like to think I'm raising my kids as cultural Jews because I'm like, nope, we get the half sours. I don't want the full. I want a half sour pickle. Get it? And then my son went food shopping with my husband. He's 13. He's like, I couldn't find the half sours anywhere. I was like, because they're not going to be in the aisle with the Vlasics. That's not where you're going to find them. You got to go into the deli area in the fridge and find them in the Tupperware and stuff like that. The containers, the
Yeah.
Chinese food containers.
So this was really fun. One more question before we close out. So some of your favorite sleuths, other than Veronica Mars, who, like, if you could have Billy team up, let's think of this as like maybe like crossover fan fiction. Who would you want Billy to team up with?
So I watch so much TV. I feel like this is just going to be, but I was loving the new Perry Mason on HBO. Talk about dark, but I was like here for it. I'm like, this show's amazing. I loved Perry Mason. I really do like you're just down on your luck, like people who rise from the ashes to just like, I love that character arc so much. Perry Mason would be good. I like, oh, what about Olivia from iZombie would be fun. That's also another Rob Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
That would be great. I also watch a ton of British crime dramas. If they're international, I'm like here for it. And Dever Morse and Billy, that would be brilliant. I actually was right. I imagined a series in my head where a woman who writes mysteries is transported to the 1960s England and then has to team up with the local detective inspector, and they have to solve crimes. And she's a I was like, imagine me pairing up with Endeavor Morse to solve crimes. And because you write them, right? You know how it works. And she walks in and she's like, that guy in the suit that we had a conversation with for 10 minutes, it's that guy who did the murder. And he'd be like, how do you know? And she's like, well, we'll figure it out at the end. But it's always that guy. I'm like, I know, I was having so much fun. But can I just before we end, Death of a Dancing Queen has really good crossover appeal for teens. I did write all my indie stuff's YA, but one of the things that Library Journal also mentioned, thank you Library Journal, was like, this is good crossover potential for teens. And I was like, yes, that's right. So if you do have teens that are looking for mysteries, that this would be fun for them, I think, because there's some cursing and there's murder, but that's something they don't know. So
I mean, for sure. I know, listen, I recently found out my 8-year-old nephew watched Stranger Things. So teens can read this.
oh,
Easy.
for sure. I mean, my 8-year-old and I watched Wednesday together.
Oh
You
my
know,
gosh, I loved Wednesday.
he loved it.
That was an interesting sleuth show. I
Yeah.
was
Oh,
not expecting that show to be what it was.
I again, it's a mystery for the
Oh, so
characters
much.
to figure out while they figure themselves out. Like that's what it all is. I thought it was so good. And
And to me, Fred Armisen as Uncle Fester.
Fester.
I have never, I've always been kind of like lukewarm on that character because, he's always kind of like a sad sack and a little whatever. But man, they made him so charismatic in that role. I was like, yes, I am here for this.
He was great. And Catherine Zeta-Jones as Morticia was so well cast.
Perfect. The casting in general was excellent, I have to say. In general, they did such a good job. And it was just like, what was it? I called it in my head, like, because it had like a little bit of Sherlock in it. I'm like, like Wednesday Addams and Sherlock, and
It was like a little bit of Riverdale. It was like a little bit. It was like I love watching those teen shows, and like they're so soapy, and I love it. And it had that with all like the different romance angles and things like that. And then my 8-year-old loved it. She loved it.
I would watch it with my kids who are turning 8. One of my sons is obsessed with Wednesday Addams, but I do think that it might be a little bloody for him. Like the two of them are a little sensitive to that type of thing. So I think there might be some nightmares, but in a year or so, I think they'll be ready.
Well, my daughter wouldn't even, she got scared by the Muppets Halloween that they had put out on Disney Plus.
Mine. Yes.
And I was
turns, man. I love this episode.
she got scared by it. And so I didn't. Yeah. So when my husband and I were planning on watching Wednesday, just the two of us, and then she sat down and watched, and she did not get freaked out by all. I think because she was so into the Wednesday character. Like she had me put her hair into braids. She was wearing black. She has these great pair of black boots from Kohl's.
I mean, talk about well done fan fiction.
She just really enjoyed it. So I guess the hokey parts, and I, sometimes I'll say to her, I'm like, these are actors. They're totally fine. They're alive somewhere in Hollywood. They're just totally fine. Not real. But she loved it. I was so shocked that she wasn't scared. I think it just entertained her, and that she just, it was fantastic. And we're like, and then her friends were watching it as well. So she got to talk to them about it. But I could talk TV till the cows come home.
Well, I appreciate that. I could too, but we are running up on time. And I do think people need to read Death of the Dancing Queen and imagine Billy crossing over, hanging out at Nevermore Academy with Wednesday. That would be interesting. But yeah, having her come and eat some half sours with her, right?
A Jewish goth castle. You're giving me ideas. I have so much fun with that.
Well, just credit Syosset Library in your thank yous. Just be like, Syosset Library, thank you for telling me this. But thank you so much. Read Death of the Dancing Queen. Get it at your library or your local bookstore. Please. Yeah. And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.